Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Now, today I've got a really amazing woman. She was a BBC broadcaster and voiceover artist in Britain, and then worked as a journalist advertiser for China Radio International in Beijing. She's the author of a humorous self-help book, Adulterers, I think I said that wrong, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, which is really amazing because there's a lot of women who go through that, and I can't wait to touch on that. And she's also currently completing another book called Hotel Chemo, My Wild Ride Through Breast Cancer and Infidelity. So having said all this, I would love to introduce you guys to a beautiful lady called CJ Grace. Welcome.
Hi, well, thank you so much for having me on your show, Grace. We're going to get very confused with all these Graces here.
I know. So the thing is, like, I got to go say, CJ, you're going to think, oh, well, she's calling me by my surname, or if we say the word Grace. But welcome to my podcast. Now, as I said, I really wanted to touch on the book because it's quite interesting. But before we do that, I want to talk about your journey. So if you want to let us know a little bit about your journey with breast cancer, you know, the usual, when you were diagnosed, what you were diagnosed with. You don't have to go specific, but, you know, what you went through. And then we'll talk about your book.
Yeah, because what happened was, in a way, I was living a charmed life. I had a great job with the BBC. Then I got transferred to work for China Radio International as a journalist advisor in China. And that was where I had a fairy tale falling in love with my husband to be. And, you know, when I fast forward to the 25th wedding anniversary we had together, it was the best one ever. We spent it in Hawaii. Things were wonderful. I thought I was in the land of the gods. And little did I know that just 2 years later, both my marriage and my health would be in tatters, because not only did I find out that he was carrying on an affair with a woman that was half his age, but also shortly after that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer for the second time, because I carried that dreaded BRCA gene that Angelina Jolie, for instance, had seen as a death sentence. So it was a huge double whammy that left me reeling, and I had to navigate through that. And that was the story. For my first bout of cancer, which I had in 2007, I had a lumpectomy. It seemed like it was pretty straightforward. The second bout of cancer, which was on the other side, was a little bit more complicated because they found a micromat in one of the lymph nodes. And because of that, they said I needed to have chemotherapy as well as radiation. So that was pretty hard to swallow. I was really not fond of the idea of chemotherapy. I was pretty anti the idea, to be quite honest. But I did go through with it, although I negotiated with my surgeon and my oncologist about the specific cocktail they used, because I did my research. One of the things that I would say for anybody going through health challenges is, if you can possibly manage it, information is power. Do your research, maybe go for second opinions, take a look and see what the options are for you. And that's what I did. And because my ex was, well, he wasn't my ex at that point, but because my husband was pretty much involved with his girlfriend at the time when I was going through this, I had to be my own advocate. I really did. And that was, it's a challenge, but in a way, it for me, it worked because I knew what I wanted. I knew how to research. Having the background as a BBC journalist, I mean, journalism doesn't pay you very well, but it really teaches you how to research. And so I really wanted to find out what side effects were likely, what alternatives were likely. And you know, as I went through this, I did both conventional and alternative therapies. And I don't know whether you can take a look at the website that I have. I have a website called adultererswife.com. And on that, I have my blogs about my relationship book, but I also have the beginning of my new book, which hasn't come out yet, Hotel Chemo, My Wild Ride Through Breast Cancer and Infidelity. And that cartoon really epitomized, that I have in my introduction, sort of epitomizes what I went through when I was going through cancer. It's like everybody and their mother's uncle has a cure for cancer that they're desperate to tell you about. And some people get really fire and brimstone over it. If you don't do it, you're going to die. You've got to follow my advice. You know, they really think they're doing you a big favor. And if you took up everything that people say you should do, they would probably take 72 hours a day to do and cost a bunch of money. And some of the things might work and some of the things might not. And some of the things would be contradictory. So, you know, you just can't do it. So this cartoon shows advice that I actually received. There I was going through chemo and radiation. So, of course, somebody tells me chemo and radiation is toxic and doesn't work. And I was also doing alternative stuff. And so, of course, another friend of mine said, well, alternative medicine is pure quackery. And then another person who was thinking that they were helping me said, oh, you got cancer because you're too tense. Relax and don't be so negative. And of course, if you shout at somebody to relax, that really helps them to relax, doesn't it? Yes, I'm sure. And you know, of course, you can get through cancer without ever being negative. And I mean, you know, it's a walk in the park for everybody, right? You know, you're not going to be negative. Duh, of course you're going to be negative sometimes, you know. And then, of course, the other kind of advice that I got, you know, if you don't give up dairy, your cancer will come back. I'm a Brit. I've got to have milk in my tea, you know. I mean, I wasn't going to give that up. But yeah, I mean, there are a number of things that they found are not good for cancer. You know, sugar isn't good for cancer, but I have to say that dark chocolate is good for the soul, and that's got sugar in it. And I'm a chocoholic. So you just have to be judicious. You have to go with your gut, because you're just going to get all this advice and it's going to be overwhelming. Having cancer is overwhelming enough as it is. But then when you have a load of friends who think they're being helpful, and some people who aren't even friends, they're just sort of people you happen to know, when you're getting all of that and they're telling you that you better follow their advice or you're definitely going to die of cancer, you know, duh, no, that's not what I want to hear. No, stop. So I think that cartoon really came from my personal experience. And I think that it is true for anybody going through any kind of cancer. It doesn't matter whether it's breast cancer or any other kind of cancer. You're always going to get absolutely tons of unsolicited advice. And some of it will be good, but some of it will be not good. And it won't all be welcome. And sometimes you just have to tell people, if they keep going on and on and on and on, you know, sorry, I'm not interested. Can you please stop? I got some amazing things that people did, which led me to put a section in my book that hasn't been published yet. But I've got an article on Thrive Global that was an abridged version of the section in my book about this. That's cancer etiquette, because a lot of people are so clueless about how to deal with people who have cancer or serious illness. And they don't realize they're being klutzes. So I thought it would be a good idea to have some do's and don'ts of how to deal with a so-called poor cancer victim. You know, this poor cancer victim, and you've got to, you know, and some of the things are well-meaning. It's not like people are trying to be trying to make your life difficult, but they really do, because it's sort of unwelcome the way that some people do it. I remember, for instance, when I did first get when I got the second bout of cancer, one person kept bombarding me with emails about what causes cancer. And I mean, you know, that horse had bolted. I already got the cancer. I didn't need to be bombarded with emails about what caused cancer. I knew a lot of the things that caused cancer anyway, but what use was that? That definitely wasn't going to raise my mood, was it? So I ended up having to tell him, stop it. I don't, you know, stop sending me these emails. But people just think they're helping you, and you just have to put a line in the sand and say, no, stop. If you're going through something like cancer and people are doing things that make you feel uncomfortable or make you actually feel worse or emotionally more distraught, then you simply have to tell them to back off. And that's why I think that the cancer etiquette is really important. It's really important for friends, relatives, caregivers to know what is a good idea and what is a bad idea in terms of the way you interact with somebody who is suffering from cancer or going through the treatment and all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, I agree with you because, like you said, if people don't know what to say, and then it's, oh, my friend's cousin's auntie had it, and then she died, and
Yeah, that
then,
really cheers you up.
doesn't it? And
Yeah,
the thing is, you're already having the anxiety. Go
yeah,
on.
and the other thing is, it's almost with one particular person, because I have another section in the book that I'm going to be bringing out, Hotel Chemo, which is called Drop 'em, and that is about the friends that I decided to let go because they just weren't serving me. The relative who really
Absolutely.
got on well with me when I was depressed. But as soon as I had a more positive attitude and things were a little bit were getting better, she wasn't as interested. The friend who, every time that person called, it was because they wanted something. I love Star Trek, and I use a Klingon expression to describe that kind of person. I call it a nuknech person, because in Klingon, you don't have hello, how are you as a greeting. You have nuknech, which means what do you want? And I really felt with so many of these people, it was nuknech. What is it you want from me now? And I'm bloody going through cancer and chemo, please. And so I just didn't want to deal with those people. And so you just have to make sure, or the people who are really just interested in the soap opera that's your life, that they want to pass on to everybody and their mother's uncle, and don't give you any confidentiality at all. I had some of those people too. And they're, calling up and they want to know what's going on. And you don't really want to be talking about what's going on. Or people who want to wallow in, oh, you're feeling, oh gosh, I'm sure you're feeling really bad and it's so bad and this, and that doesn't help you either. So you really, it is tough on the person that's trying to help you out, but
Absolutely.
you just have to you have to really be judicious. And one of the really common things that I found people will do, oh, let me know if you need anything, but you knew damn well they weren't really going to want to do anything at all. If you want to help somebody who is going through cancer and cancer treatment, you offer specific things. Can I do your gardening? Can I pick your kids up from school? Can I walk your dog? Would you like me to make you a meal? Can I do your shopping? All of that is useful. But when you say, oh, just why don't you call me and tell me what you need me to do? That's a burden on the person who's sick. And generally they won't bother unless they're so desperate that there's nobody else they can turn to. So it's always a good idea, if you do want to help somebody out, offer something specific, because that will be far more valued and far more useful.
Yeah. And also, though, if you don't like, things happen to people all over the time, all the time and all over the place. So when I don't know what the words to say is, I'm really sorry. I'm sending you positive love, but I don't know what to say to you. And I hope that you accept that. Even that is better than me trying to fix your problems when I have no idea what you're going through.
Right.
And like you said, if you don't know how to help someone, say, look, I've never done this before. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. If you can show me the way, I'll be more than grateful. Is better than, like you said, oh, just tell me what you need. I had that as well. And I had to tell people, I'm not dying. Stop.
Right.
Hey,
Yes.
Grace.
And some
How
of yes.
are you?
Oh, I know. I had that too. And we're praying for you. And I'm, oh, well, I'm not in that stage where I really need, and it's nice. Praying is probably good, but the way sometimes people do it, it's as if they're already putting your funeral date in their calendar. I mean, oh no, please.
They're organizing it.
And heavy pity and all of that. It can be kind of difficult. But then on the other hand, you've got people who really don't know what to do, so they don't have any contact with you at all, which you could do with, so it is a difficult road. It's a very difficult road for somebody who is trying to help a friend or a relative with cancer, because it is easy to get misunderstood. But if you're doing everything with love and with compassion, I think that is the way. And if you feel uncomfortable, you just say it, and you say, well, I really love you, and if there's anything I can do to help, and obviously I'm, sending all my good thoughts. That would be great. But it's always good to have suggestions that, oh yeah, I know you like chocolate. I love chocolate. Can I bring you
Me too.
some?
Yeah.
So those kinds of things are definitely a good thing, a good way to go, I think.
Absolutely. And and someone that I interviewed also said that she was very, very ill, obviously going through her chemo. And she would get messages just saying, I am thinking of you. Please don't think you need to reply. And she said they were the most amazing messages she got, because there was no, oh, now I have to reply and I'm not feeling up to replying. But it was someone reaching out saying,
That's great.
I'm right there with you. And I thought that was even just as simple as that. Yes, there were women that I've spoken to who had friends and family who sat with them and fed their families and took their kids to school. But not everyone has that. Not everyone has that opportunity to have that sort of group around them, and it's good just to have someone just reach out and say, hey, you've got this, you've got this, you're going to be okay. And enough. You don't have to say
Right,
anything,
right. And I like the way that that friend said you don't have to reply. That is so important, because sometimes there is this obligation that's put on you by all these people who want, as I said, the latest episode of how you're doing, and it's a strain. And for some of them that aren't even that close friends of yours, it's none of their business,
Yeah,
Yes, I threw up
absolutely.
today. Shall I tell you about that? I mean, no. Do they want to hear it? Not really.
No, not really. But I want to just go back to touching on the moment you said you went through like the first question I guess I have for you is, so you went through the first round of cancer, and were you diagnosed with BRCA back then or not?
Yes, I was. I and my sister, because my sister had cancer, breast cancer too, at the age of 36. They did give me the test. At that time, it was still patented by Myriad, who gave us this wonderful event where they provided snacks and water and told us we should get all our relatives tested. And of course, at that point, because it was patented by them, the test was incredibly expensive. It was around $4,000, which mostly was paid by my insurance. But thankfully, a few years beyond that, the Supreme Court in the US overturned the ruling that they could patent the gene, which they should never have been allowed to anyway, because they didn't invent it, they just discovered it. And they were making a bucket load of money from those tests. Once the patent, once they lost the patent, that same test plus a number of other things thrown in at the same time went down to about $100. So that was one of the things that I was glad to hear, that it became much easier for people to do the test, because I didn't think that it was right that my gene that was in my body should be patented by a corporation that just happened to find it. So I'm glad that at least that ruling passed in the end. But that meant that I had to be careful and have more test every 6 months, alternate mammograms with high contrast MRIs, which also do have their own side effects, because there are some issues with the gadolinium contrast material that they use in MRIs. But I did go through using that. I had MRIs every year and mammograms every year, alternated 6 months apart. And then in 2014, that was when I had the second breast cancer diagnosis. It was a very different landscape by then, because of Angelina Jolie, who had made a public statement about her having the BRCA1 gene, which is actually worse than the one I have. I have BRCA2, but she was making her prophylactic mastectomy very public. And as a result, in between my two breast cancer diagnoses, I was very strongly advised to have a prophylactic mastectomy. Now, of course, I would not want to advise anybody to make that. I wouldn't want to tell anybody what decision to make, but I knew that I didn't really want to do that. So when I was asked by my surgeon if I wanted to do it, I said very emphatically no. And a lot of my friends thought I was completely nuts. And especially since afterwards, a few years beyond that decision, I'd got breast cancer again on the other side. And yet again, the surgeon asked me if I wanted to have a prophylactic mastectomy. I still said, no way in hell. I didn't want to do it. I had felt that from my own personal experience and from my own research, it was a bit of a crapshoot to know whether it made much of a difference in survival rates. Some people will disagree with that, but that was what I thought. And I'd also just recently, I was starting a new relationship, and I did not, and enjoying a wonderful sex life. And I didn't really want to lose my breasts and have these sort of numb bags that I couldn't have any feeling in, and on top of that have all the problems from implants, because I had heard of so many problems from silicone implants that I did not want to be involved with that. In fact, one of the people that I met briefly was Nicole Deruda. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she set up the Breast Implant Illness Facebook site. She also has a website, and I think she has over 145,000 members on her Facebook site. All these people who have had implant illness. And one of the poster children for implant illness is actually Crystal Hefner, Hugh Hefner's widow, who had the silicone implants for her career rather than because of cancer. But she was so ill from the implants that she needed to get them removed. And once that happened, her health dramatically improved, and she's become a spokesperson for implant illness. So I didn't really want to go there. I just didn't want to have to deal with that. And in fact, my surgeon agreed that reconstruction is much more complicated than the mastectomy itself. It's reconstruction that can be an issue. And a lot of women these days are choosing to go flat rather than having reconstruction after a mastectomy. But, it's so much a personal choice. And people still think I'm crazy to have refused it. And who knows, maybe on my gravestone, it's going to say, here lies CJ Grace because she refused to lop off her boobs. Who knows? I mean, I just don't know. But that was my own choice. And that's what made me feel comfortable. And that is the thing. There is no one size fits all for how to deal with cancer. There's so many routes you can take and so many ways you can deal with it. And you have to feel comfortable with what you've chosen to do.
Absolutely. And I agree, because I just spoke, when I spoke to a lady, Marcy, beautiful lady, she was telling me that one of the surgeons said to her to have the reconstruction done would take, I can't remember, I don't think it was the implant reconstruction. I think it was another one, which my surgeon knows about as well, oncoplastic or whatever it's called, something like that.
There are three ways you can do it. There's the silicone implants, where you have silicone in a silicone bag. Then you have saline, which is supposedly safer, but there are some issues with mold and bacteria collecting inside, and the bag itself is still silicone as far as I know. Then the third way of doing it is to have your own fat tissue, so that it is moved from another area and put into where the breast tissue was. And that's another way of doing it, but that is also more major surgery, because you're having surgery in two or three places, basically, not just in the breasts.
Absolutely. And that's what she was saying, because her surgeon said to have the last one that you mentioned done, it takes more, you will be in the operating theater longer than someone having an open heart surgery. Wow. And she thought, it was more than 13 hours or something. And she thought, I'm going flat. So she decided to go flat. So she said, I'm going flat. It's just, exactly. Because but going back to you saying, no, thank you, thanks, but no thanks. No one knows your body more than yourself, and no one can stop you from making your own decision. Whether it's a good decision, whether it's a bad decision, whether it's a crazy decision, it's still your decision. At the end of the day, people will support you. People need to support you no matter what you do. And that brings me on to my next question, or my next thing, is because like you said, you took the conventional route and you took the the alternative route. So just touch on that, because like most of my listeners know, I also did holistic as well. I kept the Western medicine beside me, but I also did holistic. But in your case, what did you do exactly to help you with all of this?
Well, the first thing was, in terms of the chemotherapy, I negotiated with my oncologist about the cocktail. She was originally suggesting that I had adriamycin and Taxol, and may have different brand names in different countries, I'm not sure. But I did the research, and I wasn't really happy about adriamycin, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I wasn't happy with that at all. I had heart issues in my family history, and it's supposed to be really tough on the heart. And I had triple negative cancer that time. It wasn't estrogen dependent. And with triple negative, I was seeing that people were having good results from carboplatin, which it was a newer platinum-based drug. Why not have platinum in my veins? Why not? I don't have platinum jewelry. I might as well have it in my blood. But anyway, the thing is that I managed to persuade my oncologist to go with carboplatin and Taxol, which I think was less taxing on the body than the adriamycin would have been. It was still rough, but it was better for me and for the particular kind of breast cancer that I had. But the other thing I did, which I wasn't that open about with my doctors at the time, was that I did IV ozone while I was doing chemotherapy. I managed to have access to that while I was doing chemotherapy, and it made a huge difference to me. So much so that when I went to see the radiologist at the end of my, near the end of my chemotherapy, I had to plan the radiation sessions. And she looked at me and she said, "You're looking far too healthy to be on chemotherapy. What are you doing? Are you doing something to negate the effects of the chemo?" And of course, I didn't tell her what I was doing, but basically what she was telling me was I didn't look sick enough. I just didn't look sick enough. Amazing. And I attribute the fact that I didn't look sick enough to having the IV ozone, because yes, I didn't feel great through it, but it was doable. I only threw up actually once, right at the very start, before I took I didn't take the anti-nausea medication quickly enough, but I didn't suffer from that. I did have some alterations in taste. Things tasted a bit more metallic, and I couldn't deal with more bitter things. I went off 70% chocolate. I had to go down to 56% dark chocolate. But, I felt really okay. I didn't have that sallow skin. I didn't have a rash. What was wonderful was that I had to buy all these things to deal with the potential side effects of chemo. Because before you start chemo, you go and have an interview with somebody at the center, and they tell you very nicely all these horrible things that could happen to you as side effects from chemo. So off you go to the local pharmacy and pick up all kinds of things that hopefully would deal with those things. The nice thing was that most of those items that I bought, I gave them straight back to the pharmacy, unopened, unused at the end of chemo. So I do believe that I benefited from the IV ozone, even though it wasn't something that I'd made. I didn't tell the doctors at the time. I did not do it through radiation because it is more contraindicated to do something like that throughout radiation. But I took herbal medicines. I did resonant frequencies, all kinds of stuff that my more conventional straight-laced friends thought were total and utter garbage. But, for me, I think they were helpful. And I would say that, even if somebody is working with a voodoo witch doctor and it's improving their mood and making them feel better, so long as this voodoo witch doctor isn't draining their bank accounts and writing themselves in as the beneficiary of their will, why not? Let them do it. So really that's my view.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, because at the end of the day, I also say that when I walked into, we have a what we call Peter Mac. Now, when my mum had a cancer, an external cancer, more than 25 years now. At the time, it was about 25 years. And Peter McCallum Hospital was this tiny little hospital in the middle of a side street. When I went in 2018 to see my oncologist, I thought I was walking into the 7-star hotel in Dubai. And I thought, oh, I do not like this. And I mentioned it. I mentioned it in my podcast. I thought, wow, this is way too expensive for my liking. If you really wanted to help the people, you don't need these fancy chairs and all of that. And it does in Australia. The last I looked, someone going through cancer for the 5 years will spend $1.5 million, which is probably about £500,000, give or take, 500, 600,000 pounds
And
in 5 years.
I'm based in the US, so I'd probably
Oh,
understand.
sorry, the US. So
rate.
the US, correct. So in the yeah, I'm sorry because of your accent, I kept thinking, but that's exactly right. So I just thought, oh, this is a little bit too expensive for my tasting. And I go back to that, and like you said, you asked your doctor what are the pros and cons. Now, when I went to the oncologist, in my case, it was tamoxifen. I'm not sure if you've heard of that. It's here in Australia.
Yeah, tamoxifen is the pill they want you to take after.
Correct.
Yes, and I turned that down too. I looked up the side effects. I didn't like it, so I never. Even though I was recommended to take that after my first breast cancer in 2007. I did my research. I didn't like the side effects. I didn't think it was helpful enough, so I turned down the prescription. But that's my view. You know, other people may have a totally different view and may be fine with it and may feel that it's beneficial. I also didn't take Arimidex, which is what they advise you to take when you're beyond menopause, I think. And the trouble with Arimidex is that it creates osteoporosis, which you really don't need. At least I didn't think I needed that when I was going through later life, when osteoporosis is more likely to happen anyway. So I turned down that as well. And, you know, again, some people might have thought that I was crazy to do that. That was just the choice I made at the time.
Yeah, but the thing is too, it's not that you turn it down because you're just like, no. You, like you said, you did your research. I did my research. The lady, the oncologist, the cons were higher than the pros in my case. And I say that. So give me a second alternative. Now, this lady, my second alternative was to get a hysterectomy done. However, the pros of the hysterectomy were coming down because the cons were high. Because I would go through a hysterectomy and I hadn't gone through menopause, then my chances of heart failure would increase.
So what did you choose to do? Did you choose to do a hysterectomy or not?
Nothing.
Well, yeah, because again,
nothing.
With my BRCA, with the BRCA gene, and this is one of the things that I felt that Angelina Jolie probably would have been better off publicizing this issue as well, or at least as much as the breast cancer issue. When you have BRCA, you have an increased risk of ovarian cancer. And although that risk is not as high as your risk of breast cancer, it's so much more serious because so many people get breast cancer and survive. The survival rate is very, very high for breast cancer. It is not for ovarian cancer because they're tiny little organs and it's very easy for the cancer to spread into the cavity to everything else. And by the time they find it, it can be gone too far to really do much. So what I did, and actually this happened to Angelina Jolie as well. She had there is a test you can do called the CA125 test for, it's a blood test that's not 100%, not super accurate, but it's sort of okay, that you can do to see if there's anomalies there to add suspicion that you might have a precancerous or a cancerous condition in the ovaries. And she had an anomalous reading and ended up having her ovaries removed, which was a big deal because she was still premenopausal. But she didn't make that ovarian cancer risk of from the BRCA gene one of the things that she talked about. And I think it is an important part. It's an important thing to consider. And I was told when I found out that I had the BRCA gene, they say, oh, yes, you should have a full hysterectomy with your ovaries removed. That's what they recommended. At the time, I didn't want to do any of that. I was still premenopausal. I still had periods. I didn't want to be slammed into an unnatural menopause. And so I waited. Then I went to England for a wedding, a family wedding. And I spoke to some, old family friends, and I talked to them about the fact that I'd had breast cancer and all of this. It's interesting because I just had two friends. They had breast cancer and they did fine. But then both of them, sometime after, they both died of ovarian cancer. And I thought, hell, this is a wake-up call. I need to deal with this. So I decided that I would have what they call an oophorectomy, and that's the ovaries and the fallopian tubes taken out. I did not want to have the full hysterectomy because my view was that for me, I wanted to keep my womb intact because it's a big organ that keeps everything in place. And I was reading all kinds of side effects from getting rid of that, ranging from urinary incontinence to all kinds of problems that I did not want to be having. And so I decided to just go for the oophorectomy, for the ovaries and the fallopian tubes to be removed. And the only reason they say you should have the full hysterectomy is that there is a very small amount of the fallopian tube that would still remain in the uterus if you don't have that removed as well. But I just didn't want to have a full hysterectomy. My sister chose to have the full hysterectomy, but I didn't. I didn't want to do that. My view is always less is more. And, I don't know whether I made the right decision or not, but that's the decision I chose to make.
But like you said, it was for you, it felt right to do what you got to do. And I just went to my gynecologist and he gave me the great news that I'm one of these people who are going to be long-term bleeders. And I thought, great, here I am thinking I'm going to hit menopause. I'm 50. It's all over. Yay. And he's like, no. And I thought, great. Like you said, I don't touch anything unless it's necessary,
Right.
So far, my surgeon hasn't discussed that.
Yeah, luckily, by the time I did have the oophorectomy, I had already reached menopause. I just reached menopause, in fact, at that point. And so I did not have to have an unnatural menopause. I didn't have any problems with menopause, and I was really happy with that. So, and that's what I had intended to do. I'd intended to revisit the whole thing about whether to remove my ovaries once I reached menopause. So I'm glad I did it because I think that it is a hell of a risk. It's a hell of a risk for people with the BRCA gene. But again, I'm sure there are plenty of people who would have made the decision to keep everything or to get rid of all of it. There's so many ways to skin the cat, so to speak. And you just, as I keep saying, you got to do what makes you personally comfortable. You don't have to follow somebody else and copy what they've done. It's got to feel right to you in your gut.
Exactly. My mum, I became the fifth member of our family, cousins, auntie, grandmother, mother, with breast cancer. But my sister, we're not BRCA. We're not in the BRCA. But one of my sisters decided to have a double mastectomy. But because she had a hysterectomy done prior, she was on hormone replacements. And that's when they said, well, with these hormone replacements, you have a higher chance of getting breast cancer. So she decided to have a double mastectomy. So, you know what I mean? That's her choice. Like, I was never told I needed that. Thankfully, my doctor, she knows I'm still going through my cycles every month, and she hasn't. Now, my doctor, if it gets to the day where she says, Grace, you got to get rid of that, that's when I'll really ask her a lot of questions. But right now, I'm not BRCA1. I'm not BRCA2, gratefully, even though my mum passed away of cancer, and I'm not sure if it was cervical or uterus. But my mother actually, unfortunately, passed away while we were getting our results back for the BRCA1 and 2. So because she needed to know if her kids are going to be safe, We are safe. When I got diagnosed, I did it again just to be safe. So it's in the system. God forbid another family member gets diagnosed again. My blood's already there. I'm good to go. So now I just want to talk about because you've got so many different things that I'd love to talk to you about. Now, one of the things I'm going to leave that one last because I like that one there. But cancer, we spoke about the cancer etiquette. What about cancer and sex? A lot of people forget. Okay, let me say that. Whether you've had chemo, radiation, or nothing, there are a lot of women who just feel like withdrawing. They don't feel the sexual needs, but then there's others that go, no, 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 I'm going full gun ho. Just speak a little bit about cancer and sex for us.
Yeah, there really have to. There are so many aspects to that, and if you are, one of them is emotional. It's very hard to feel super sexy when you're going through chemo and you maybe feel a little nauseous. You've got no hair. In some ways, the last thing you really want to do is get intimate with somebody. So you have to be a partner of somebody who is going through chemo. Does have to be very aware that that can be the case. And sometimes it will affect the libido, in which case you're not going to be that interested. And chemo in particular has a lot of effects on the body that definitely can be passion killers. One of the funny things that I found, and I will admit this in public, was that I became a windbag. I had a lot more farts and stuff like that when I was going through chemo and all of that, or the aftermath of it. And you have to have a partner that's understanding to do that. And if you can laugh about some of the things that you're going through and just have fun with it, it goes a long way. And you don't necessarily have to do any kind of sex that's uncomfortable, but you definitely want to keep the cuddles and go slowly and just keep loving and intimate, and different people are going to react different ways. And obviously, for example, if you've had breast surgery, your breasts are going to be pretty sore, and or at least the breast that's been operated on is going to be pretty sore, so that might be off limits for a while that's healing. So you have to sort of play it by ear, and you need somebody that is very understanding. I have I've got a chapter in my book that hasn't come out yet, the Hotel Chemo book, called Sex and Cancer, and there is a section in there called Porcupine Sex. The reason why I put that in there is, how do porcupines have sex? Very carefully. So you have to just be more careful. You have to, if for example you have joint pain, which is a common side effect of chemotherapy and of general cancer pain and radiation, well, then you find positions that make you more comfortable. You adjust, you change things around. And one thing that goes a long way is having a loving partner that still tells you still look attractive, that tells you how much he loves you, and all that kind of stuff. To give you an example, I remember when I was going through chemo and I'd lost my hair, and my ex came to visit. We were separated at the time, and he said, he was joking, but it still was a little bit tough to deal with. He said, "Oh, you look like a 500-year-old vampire." And I thought, oh. But then, when I was with my boyfriend, he told me how he still found me attractive and how much he loved me and all. So that was lovely. So you just have that kind of thing makes the sex better. And you have to, I suppose it's really the same as treatment options. There are so many different ways of dealing with sex. It's just got to be what you feel comfortable with. And there may well be a period when you're just not interested, absolutely not interested. Last thing on your mind, particularly if you feel like your life is at risk, the last thing you're worrying about is sex. But after a while, it can come back, and it can be something that is still joyous and still fun. I do remember, I have cartoons throughout both books. And the cartoons in my first book, Adulterous Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, some of those are a little bit raunchy because, what is adultery if it's not about sex? But generally in my second book, Hotel Chemo, they're more restrained cartoons. They don't really deal with those kinds of subjects, except that I do have one cartoon in the sex and cancer chapter. And the title of that is Masturbation as a Chore. And the reason why I wrote that was because I went to see my pelvic floor therapist, who was just brilliant. Because if you get, a lot of people, for example, have scarring from childbirth, which creates painful intercourse. And I didn't realize that had happened to me, and I didn't realize there was a cure for it, that the people could get rid of that scar tissue, and you could find that you no longer had painful intercourse. Amazing. So the lady I found was an absolute miracle worker. But while I was going through chemo and, not seeing anyone during that, just while I was going through chemo, I did have a boyfriend at the time, but it was very, very new, and I didn't have him see me when I was actually going through the chemo itself, although he did come and see me when I was still chemo bald. And so she said, you really need to keep the area down there. You need to keep it lubricated. You need to, because otherwise you could find that it dries out and it contracts and this and that. And so she told me I should get a vibrator and all of this and use it a certain number of times a week. And so I said to her, oh my God, masturbation is a chore. And she said, oh, don't say it like that. But, these are just the things that you do to keep everything still intact, to keep everything working right. Even though this is not something that you would normally mention in polite company, it is an issue. And it's a good idea to address these things so that you can bring yourself back to normal. It's always good to know that there's a fix, that you can heal, that you can make things better, that you can get back to the way you were before. And if you can give people the information to do that, I think it's a good idea.
Absolutely. Because the thing is, you're going through that. Like you said, it's really important to have a supporting partner, because if you don't feel supported, you then feel even more withdrawn. Like you're thinking, I'm already not feeling it, but I'm going to withdraw even more. And I remember it was so funny because I remember when I got operated on my left breast and my lymph nodes and everything. My husband was just so caressing. He would caress it, like in the sense he's nurturing it back to health as well. And I thought that is so important. Whereas, other people it's something that we talk about because like I said, I didn't go through chemo radiation, so I don't know. But a lot of women that I've spoken to have said that, it gets dry. I had to use lubricant. I got to use lubricant and things like that. And I thought, you know what, that is really interesting, because sometimes you really need to do these things just to keep it going. And like you said, if it means having a play down there, go for it. You know what I mean? If that helps as well, because it's not just, the thing is, it's not just making sure that you don't keep it dry, high and dry. It's more that it's a type of way of feeling relaxed, feeling really good about yourself. You release that, you have the orgasm and you release that, and it makes you feel really good. And that's really important too. You know what I mean? Because like you said, you're already in fight or flight. Am I going to, what's going to be next? What's going to happen next? So, and going to the next part, I guess, is because, we talk about being positive and things like that, but you say that being positive is a good and bad thing. So what do you mean by that?
Well, there is the tyranny of positive thinking. And that's where, that one guy in that cartoon that we looked at earlier comes out. You need to relax. If you don't relax, you'll get cancer again. The reason why you've got cancer is because you're so tense. That is the tyranny of positive thinking and of telling people that they have to be positive and relaxed. You can't force it. You can make somebody relax by being nice to them and nurturing them, like that wonderful story you just mentioned of your husband really caressing your area, your breast and all of that after you'd had surgery. That kind of thing actually brings the tissue back to life, and makes your recovery faster. That is good. And sure, you do not want to wallow in negativity. You don't want to feel totally depressed and thinking, churning your thoughts all the time. But you don't want to be feeling bad about feeling bad. And often you get caught in this horrible spiral that you have to have positive thoughts, because you're not going to heal if you don't have positive thoughts. And well, I'm worried because I can't have positive thoughts all the time. And the fact that I'm now thinking about, well, I have to have positive thoughts, that's not a positive thought. And well, what am I going to do? No. So I think you have to give yourself the freedom to feel lousy when you feel lousy, and just do activities that create more positivity in your life. And that's where I came up with a 6-part plan to try to make sure that I got off the emotional roller coaster that was creating negativity. It worked for the infidelity, and then I had to use the same techniques again for dealing with the breast cancer. And there were 6 things that I did, and I can just mention them briefly. And they don't have to be done in any particular order, but these are things that allow you to get off that negative emotion roller coaster, which is inevitable. You're inevitably going to feel negative emotions when you find out that you have breast cancer. You're not going to think, oh, wow, I feel great, I've just been told I've had breast cancer. Oh, yes. No, you're going to feel pretty crappy when you first find it out. And you have to find ways to not feel crappy any longer. And so what I did was I found confidants and mentors who had my best interests at heart. And these can be friends or paid counselors. And you can vent your deepest, darkest thoughts to them. You can process all your emotions with them. They give you good advice. They care about you. And, they don't mind how long you're hanging on the phone, churning your negativity. But they try to pull you out of it, and they give you great advice, and you feel a great sense of support from those people. And I did have people like that. It's always good to have supporters of both sexes, because you get a very different view from men than you would from women. The second thing I did was rebuilding my circle of friends. I wanted to cultivate existing and new connections. And I'd found that almost all my friend circle was connected to my husband or connected to the business that we shared. And of course, if you're dealing with a combination of infidelity and breast cancer, the last people you want to discuss that with are people that are part of your professional circle. That doesn't work. You're not going to be able to do that. So I needed to rebuild my circle of friends and get back to being friendly with people that I was friendly with before the marriage, because I'd let a lot of those people go. And that was huge. There was even one woman who was a great friend of mine who was sure that she'd done something to offend me, because she'd written me all these emails and I'd ignored them. I hadn't responded. I was so busy dealing with my husband, his business, raising the children, dealing with the house, all of the boring minutiae that you do as a wife, I suppose. So she thought that she'd offended me. Luckily, we reconnected, and it was as if we'd never separated, we'd never been apart. So that was great. But it is important to have a strong circle of friends. And if you're married, obviously your husband is a major part of that. In my case, that was not true. But the third thing was laughter therapy. And that does tie in very much with positive thinking. I was brought up on a diet of Monty Python. I wanted to be with friends who brought me up and didn't bring me down. I wanted to watch comedies and not depressing dramas. I remember I was invited to go and see Wild with Reese Witherspoon, and I thought, no, I don't think so. It's a movie about a woman dealing with depression, and she's going along the Pacific Coast Trail in California or wherever it is. No, I do not need to watch somebody be depressed when I'm feeling a little down from having this infidelity and cancer happening to me. So I didn't do that. I did like sci-fi. One of the movies that I enjoyed was Guardians of the Galaxy. But the problem with that one was the scene there where the protagonist's mother is dying of cancer. And there she was, chemo bald, right when I was chemo bald. And I could have done without that scene. But I was trying to do things that would make me laugh, that would bring me up. I stopped watching the news. That was an amazing choice to make because I was a BBC journalist. I'd always watched the news, but the news is all bad news. It's nothing that's going to make you feel uplifted. So I gave up watching the news. I needed positivity. I needed to see stuff that would make me feel positive and that would make me laugh. The other thing I did, number 4 on my 6-part list, was to work on loving my body and trying to become more beautiful, despite the cancer, despite somebody telling you that you weren't the only one anymore and that they wanted to stay with their mistress. I looked after myself because I knew nobody else would. I wanted to make sure I was eating well, sleeping enough, and getting exercise. Outdoor exercise was really key. I found that I would just force myself to go out in nature at least 15 minutes a day. It was incredibly effective for banishing the blues. And if there's just one thing you can do, just go out in nature for 15 minutes a day. That will have a huge impact on your mood. I think that certainly it did for me, and it also did for a friend of mine who was going through depression. I told her to do that, and it sort of got her out of staying in bed and not being able to get out of the house. She finally got out of it by forcing herself to go in nature for 15 minutes, walking around in a local park, and it was a miracle. Made her feel so much better. So the next thing, number 5, was to try to find my passion and become more of a hedonist, because I'd spent so much of my life energy looking after my husband's affairs, and I never made time for things I enjoyed. I was sort of nose to the grindstone the whole time. And it's so important to do things you enjoy, because that will make you feel better. That will make you feel positive and creative. And so many people let go of the things they love, of the things that they are good at, the things that make them feel creative, once they get into, I don't know, a long-term relationship or the work world, or dealing with serious health issues. But really, you've got to, whatever is happening, you've got to make time to do things you enjoy. For me, it was writing. I love writing. I was always good at it. And I always found that a creative outlet. For other people, it could be playing a musical instrument, volunteering for a cause that they really believe in. And again, it's also an opportunity to find kindred spirits and build your connections with people. So that was the 5th thing. And the 6th thing, which is the most difficult, but it is very important, I found it very important both for going through the infidelity and the breast cancer, was to try to live more in the present. Because when you think of it, the past is gone and the future doesn't exist. All you have is the now. But so many of us, even without having gone through adversity such as breast cancer or infidelity, so many of us are not really living in the present. You're worrying about things that you can't do anything about. If your mind is full of, oh, I should have done it this way, and maybe if I had done this, then the cancer wouldn't have happened, or my relationship wouldn't have collapsed, or maybe I got the cancer because I did this, and I should have done that, and I made the wrong decision here, and what can I do? It's all gone. It's irrelevant. And then you start worrying about the future. Well, what's going to happen? Am I going to die? Or, and where am I going to live? And what am I going to live on? And those thoughts, you've got to plan for the future. You've got to try and sort your life out somewhat, but you don't want to be obsessing about the future. You really want to be enjoying what's right in front of your nose, because if you're not really living, you're just existing. So I did try and do mindfulness practices, and that's actually one of the things I have in I have a free PDF that your listeners can download from my website, called Overcoming Infidelity: Tools to Tame the Roller Coaster of Negative Emotions. Now, I use the same stuff for overcoming the negativity I felt from breast cancer. Works just as well. And those are really important things to do. I also included in there a mindfulness exercise that involves using a piece of wrapped chocolate, because I'm a chocoholic. I love chocolate. And you can find that on my website, cjauthor.com. Go straight to the page on my website that has both the free PDF and a link to the video to follow along and do the chocolate mindfulness exercise if that's something you'd like to do. I've lost the sound. I can't hear you. I don't know why.
I just lost my mouse, believe it or not. So
Oh, okay.
sorry about that.
Okay.
Look, I agree with both the fifth and the sixth. I agree with all of them, but definitely the fifth and sixth. And it's really funny because I just finished with your fifth one. I just literally did a podcast yesterday talking about why is it that we wait to get sick and then we do what we've always wanted to do. It's like,
I can tell you exactly why. Because if things are sort of more or less okay, sort of hunky-dory, maybe they're not absolutely top perfect, but they're okay. Everything sort of more or less works, and not really, you don't need, nothing changes, and you just, muddling along. You don't have an incentive to change. But when you have adversity, when stuff happens that really rocks you off your foundation, like for me, infidelity and breast cancer, it's a kick in the pants to make change. Because particularly breast cancer, or cancer as opposed to infidelity, it shows you have an expiration date. And so if you don't live the life you want now, when the hell are you going to do it? And that's really what I felt. You've got to do something now. And adversity is a catalyst for so many people to improve their lives. It sounds like a rubbish cliche, but it's actually true. And so that from the post-traumatic stress, you end up getting post-traumatic growth. There even have been studies on that, on the whole new post-traumatic growth issue, because you realize, wow, I've lived my life, and have I done what I wanted? Am I happy? Is this the life I want to lead? Am I with the person that I want to be with? Am I in a job that I really want to do? Have I done the creative things I want to do? Because when you think about it, if you're on your deathbed, are you going to be regretful about the fact that you didn't clean the house that time, you didn't answer all your emails, you didn't, minister to your Facebook profile? Or is it going to be that you didn't tell somebody that you loved them, that you didn't put out and write the book that you've always wanted to do, that you never learned to play the saxophone and you always had a burning desire to do it? Those are the things that will make your heart sing. And so you need to use, at least I needed to use, the adversity I went through to reevaluate my life and what I wanted to do. And obviously I never thought that, when I was growing up, I never thought, oh yes, I'm going to grow up and become an authority on infidelity or breast cancer or whatever the hell it is. I didn't think that, but it just evolved. I always knew I loved writing, and I always liked speaking, and I had a career in journalism, broadcasting, radio broadcasting. So I did do that, but all of that went away when I got married. I had 30 years of ministering to my husband's career and not ministering to mine. And it was a very valuable and worthy career that he had. And I don't regret the time that I spent on that. I don't regret any of it, because I had really two great children. There were good things in the marriage. And, despite all of the infidelity, I do not regret the marriage, because when you think about it, regret is not about the past. It's about the present. And so if you've been brought to a place where you are happy, if you are happy with your life as it is now, you do not regret the past. So I feel happy with my life as it is now. I feel grateful. Actually, I'm grateful to my husband and his girlfriend, or my ex-husband and his girlfriend, because if they hadn't done what they did, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I'm a lot happier than I was in the marriage. I didn't even realize that I wasn't happy in the marriage. Adversity really can make you reevaluate your life and put you on a path that is actually better. Obviously, when you are going through serious health problems, you've got the additional problem of feeling lousy, of not having the full energy that you would normally have. But even with that, it is a way that you can step back, not be so involved in the endless minutiae of life, and you just can step back and think about what it is you really enjoy and just focus on that. And that really is how you become positive. And positivity, your original question was the positivity debate. And there are loads of studies out there that prove that a positive attitude does improve health outcomes. But there are also studies out there that seem to prove that a positive attitude doesn't necessarily change your health outcome. So it's a mixed bag, but you certainly feel better with a positive attitude, and you seem to attract people into your life who are more positive and better for you if you have a positive attitude. But it's very hard to manufacture it, and you do have cases where somebody appears on the surface to have a positive attitude, and they're smiling and they're saying everything's fine and all of this kind of stuff. But inside, they really are not positive, and they're not happy, and they're having all kinds of issues. Some of the folks who end up committing suicide, you'd never imagine that would be what they would do, because they'd been so cheery on the outside. So the exterior view of somebody is not necessarily what is truly inside them. And what I did find also in terms of the attitude of the tyranny of positive thinking is that sometimes it's just easier on friends, relatives, and caregivers if somebody has a positive attitude or appears to be cheery, because it's easier for those friends and caregivers. It's sort of like a compliance thing. It's much easier to deal with somebody who appears to be in a good mood rather than somebody who's who's cantankerous. But sometimes really strong, feisty, cantankerous people end up beating cancer and doing very, very well. So as I said, there are pros and cons of this whole positive thinking debate. And I think it's great. I think a positive attitude is very valuable. But I also think that it is really unhelpful to try to force a positive attitude on somebody who is going through cancer. And I remember somebody who was saying that to me, telling me that I needed to have a positive attitude and this, that, and the other when I was going, because when I first heard about my second bout of cancer and realizing that I was going to have to go through chemo, because that was a huge issue for me, I felt like crap. I really felt like crap. And one of the people who was telling me I needed to have a positive attitude, I remembered how negative they themselves had been when they went through a difficult time. It was totally hypocritical, totally and utterly hypocritical. Okay, you want the positive attitude, you have the bloody chemo, all right? See how positive you are. See how you feel with your hair falling out, And you cannot manufacture it. It's got to be there. And so you're going to feel negative. It's just the way it's part of the animal, Nobody's going to feel wonderful about having cancer, but you work towards feeling all positive, and you use it as a catalyst to decide how you want to live the rest of your life to be happier and to be more fulfilled. And so that's my view of the positive thinking debate.
Yeah, well, the thing is, because I remember speaking to my surgeon, and it was so funny. I adore her. And she said to me, Grace, something has to be done. Scientists have to look into how the mindset is so strong. And I thought, oh, honey, where have you been living? But it's just, yeah, it was. It was more like, oh, I felt like cradling her. Where have you been? But she said something really, really interesting to me, because she said to me, women who go in to get a lumpectomy done, or
yeah.
a lumpectomy, sorry, or anything to do with it, where they're removing the cancer, if they're highly stressed at the time they go under anesthetic, it can actually spread. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? And she
Wow.
said that's why, yeah. And she even said that is why they actually offer, like, people who've got like high blood pressure and all of that, they give them those sort of tablets for people to take to calm them before they go in. And I thought, it is stressful. You know, when you go and get a scan, it's called scanxiety these days and things like that, because it's scary because you don't know. But getting, anxious because you're about to get a test done is different than living in fight or flight every 5 seconds. And that's where I was living. I was living in that, and in fear a lot and things like that until I could get over it. But being positive, exactly, like you can't, like people would say to me, and I don't know if I ever said to you, is, oh, what is it? You need to have strength. No, sorry, the best one. You need to have faith. Now, I get it now, but there are times where I'm like, what does that even mean? What are you telling me to do? I don't get it. You got to have strength. You've got to have courage. Why? What do you mean? How do I get that? So that's the parts where you're saying don't force someone, because someone's going to sit there and go, I don't know what you're talking about, Grace. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that the penny didn't drop for them, and that's okay. So just be careful what you say. Oh, you're always negative Nancy. I get it. You don't want negative Nancy around you. I don't want negative Nancy around me. But at the same time, if someone's not getting it, help them. Help them understand. But the other thing too I loved was number 6, in the present. Yes, yes, yes. That's all I have to say. Because I was explaining to someone, I love my Tony Robbins. I love Tony Robbins. I love my Tony Robbins, pen here. But if I hold on to it when it's the ink leaves and I go, oh, I'm going to be suffering. Use it, move on. Be in the present. Right now, how are you feeling, Grace? Amazing. How were you feeling before? I had a bit of a headache, but that was before. Don't worry about it. How are you feeling now? Amazing. Okay, live in the now. Live in the now. And a lot of people go, no, I need to, like you said, of course, it's important to make goals. I think it's important to make goals. It doesn't matter how far you are in your journey. You need to make goals. If you're at a stage that's horrific, stage 3, stage 4, you don't know, still make plans, because like you said, it brings in a positive mindset. Go for it. To have it is like for any person. You and I, we're good. We still make goals. We don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow. I don't know. I'm not sure if you get the contract. I didn't get the contract, so I don't know. But I'm still going to create goals, aren't I? So regardless what you're going through, create goals. Do what you love to do. Have hobbies. Like you said, you want to play that instrument? Go for it. You want to write a book? Go for it. You want to be a public speaker? Go for it. And the thing is, really go for it, but with passion. With passion, not because you have to, but because you get to do it, because you want to do it. I think that's really important, because we don't know when our end is near. And that brings me on to the next thing, because you talk about death and dying. Of course, I always say, when people go, oh, I'm going to die. When someone tells my surgeon, am I going to die from this? She looks at him and says, honey, you could walk out the front door and get hit by a bus. I don't know. So I always say every time I wake up in the morning, I'm closer to dying than to living. And that's the truth. I'm 50 years old. I don't know. I don't know. But what do you actually, like, when you say death and dying, do you want to explain a little bit about what you mean by all of that?
Well,
Share it with us.
one of the things that happens when you go through cancer is it really is a reason to get your affairs in order and think about, well, how would I, because the final chapter of my hotel chemo book is called Resting in Peace. And I do talk about some, for example, terminal diagnosis malfunctions, where I've spoken to people who did get terminal diagnoses. One in particular, a wonderful guy who was told that he had 2 months to live. He had a tumor, I think it was on his tonsil, that was in a place that was incredibly difficult to remove. And so after going to the ER, the surgeon calls him up, does this over the phone, and tells him to get his affairs in order because there's nothing they can do. What did he do? He got a second opinion, found a surgeon that was able to operate, and now 8 years later, he's still around. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to believe what a doctor is telling you. Sometimes when people are given terminal diagnoses, it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But that's one of the issues I cover. But I do cover, you know, dealing with wills, you know, burying the hatchet as well as the deceased, because, you know, I think that if somebody is on their deathbed, it is a time when they will want to heal rifts with family. You know, if there's been a child, a grown child that they have no longer have a relationship with, it's often the time when they reconnect, and there's a certain amount of forgiveness. And then it enables the person who's dying to die more in peace. And it's also, I feel, if you are going through any kind of serious health problems, it's good to make your affairs clear so that you don't leave your survivors in a mess. If you have a clear will, if you have clear instructions on what you want to have done in terms of your funeral. I mean, it sounds very gruesome, but it really is important, because it's bad enough for you know, your grown kids to have to deal with you kicking the bucket. That is not a pleasant thing for them. But then if they are left with a mess, they don't know what to do. They don't know what you would have wanted. The financial affairs are all a mess, and you haven't a clue they haven't a clue where anything is. I think that it is an incentive to organize your affairs. And it's good to have those things done, whether or not you have a terminal diagnosis. And I have to say that going through a divorce, as I did, was a great incentive to do that, because you have to detail all your assets and all your affairs in order to go through a divorce proceeding. And those documents end up being very useful in terms of planning your will and giving your children the access to where everything is. And I think that's important to do. It's not necessarily a pleasant thing to do, but I think that it is, it's showing that you love your family. It's showing you love your kids, that you're not willing to leave them with a horrible mess to deal with once you pass. And, you know, I also in that chapter had a lot of fun planning a funeral, because I have specific views on what I would want. I don't agree with some of the very fancy ways funerals are done in America, you know, embalming and fancy coffins and all of that. That for me, you know, I would go for direct to cremation. If it was good enough for my cat, it's good enough for me. You know, just put me in a plastic box and spread my ashes over the ocean. That would do me fine. My family do not need to pay for an expensive funeral, an expensive coffin, you know, any of that, or a burial plot. That's not what I want. But you want to make that 150% clear to your family, because they will only want to do what you want. And if they're feeling, you know, bereaved and bereft and all of that, they might be easy prey to, say, funeral directors who want to push them into a very expensive funeral for you. You don't need that. I don't need it. Maybe some people want that, but I don't want it. If I'm gone, let them have a good party. But I don't really need a fancy funeral. So those are things that I talked about, because I think it's important to talk about. We hate talking about death. We're very scared about death, but it's inevitable, whether you have cancer or not. Whether you have it's going to happen to all of us. It can happen tomorrow. And so it's a good idea to have at least some idea of how you want things to go when that happens. I'm not looking forward to dying. I don't want to die. I want to keep going for as long as possible, but it will happen. And it behooves me to at least make some kind of plan for that. And when you have cancer, it shows you, wow, I could die soon. bloody hell, how's that going to work out? I better sort out what I want to do. So that's what that final chapter was all about. And I tried to put a lot of humor into it because, in some ways there are funny things, and actually some funerals are quite hysterical, especially when things go wrong. And I got a few stories like that in my book. But yeah, so yeah, I think death and dying is an important part of the whole cancer equation that you have to think about. Even if you don't have a terminal diagnosis, it's always going to be it will always be there. You can, because they say, I mean, what I was told, I wasn't told that the cancer was cured. I was told it was in remission. Ugh. But so be it. It's just the way of the world. And I just, as you said, you could get run over by a bus tomorrow, in which case it doesn't really matter if you would have got cancer in 5 years. You're already dead anyway. So
Exactly. And it's quite interesting because I met an amazing gentleman, probably about a year ago now, probably a little bit more. Amazing human being. He was given, I think, 18 months. And like you said, I don't believe in doctors giving contracts, but some doctors do, and that's fair enough. My doctor refuses to give someone a contract, even though she may know. But this gentleman was amazing. He left such an impression, an imprint on my heart. He was an amazing gentleman, and believe it or not, 18 months almost to the day he passed away. But he lived his life to the fullest. But then I also read a book. It's an Australian author, and she actually goes around and she writes little stories about people, what they go through. And she went to I've forgotten the name of what they call it. It's the people that they help the family. If you're dying, they help the family. If someone's going into palliative care, this is a person who goes there and says, okay, here family, here, patient, what do you want to do? And like you said, what she ended up having is it wasn't even an awakening. She wanted to have a party where everything that you would have done at an awakening, she did while she was alive. So people put photos up of her. They wrote about her, how she was wonderful, and all of these things. And I thought, isn't that great? Because we hear about it after, and she's thinking, oh, well, I'm going to be dead. I don't want to know. I'm not going to get to know what my friends think of me. So I want to do this while I'm alive. And I thought, isn't that interesting?
oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
Great
I
idea.
thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought so too. I thought, isn't that great? Because she was a lady who was dying. She had terminal cancer, and she said, no, this is what I want to do. So they hired a hall, and they had the food and the everything. It was a party. They celebrated her life. And I thought, how wonderful is that? Because she gets to know the impact she made on someone's life. Because isn't it crazy when you hear about, he was amazing to me, or she left such a beautiful impression on me. Well, isn't it beautiful if someone got to tell you that? And you
Right.
go, well,
Well,
I'm not
that's a great idea. I think I'm going to have to put that in my book as an idea. I'm going to
you
write
might.
that. Yes, I mean, because
I'll
I have to stop continuing to write it because it's supposed to be finished. But that is such a fantastic idea that I think I need to put it in. That's a terrific idea, to basically have the memorial while the person's still alive, and
Yep.
enjoy that with the person. What a fabulous! That's really fabulous.
I thought it
So,
was, and
yeah.
I'll send you the book if you. I'll actually send you the book if you're interested in this book or anything. But it was just amazing. But the last thing, actually, I wanted to touch on this because you say cancer as a teacher. I always think that too. I always think that it's taught me so much in life. Having it, it still teaches me. I'm still, I'm a student, but I'm also a teacher in life. But what's your take on that?
Well, in a way it is. I mean, I have to say people were telling me that I was getting cancer it was a learning experience. When I was actually going through chemo and people were telling me stuff like that, it did make me want to slap them in the face. To be honest, it's the last thing you really, oh yeah, you're having this horrible time with chemo, but it's a real good lesson for you. You take this lesson. I don't need I don't need you telling me I'm having a lesson here. But the fact is, it is a teacher. It does give you an incentive to move on and do whatever it is that you want to do. And it also was something that helped me to learn more about what breast cancer was all about, why it happens, how people can reduce the chance of it happening, what they can do, what I can do, all of this kind of stuff, and made me want to read tons of material, because I am a former journalist with the BBC, and I do go very anal with research. And so I read tons of books. I learned a lot of stuff. Some of the things that I found out were really quite eye-opening. One of the things, for example, that I read this book called Dressed to Kill. Amazing title, brilliant title. And what it is about is it's written by an author, husband and wife team. Last name was Singer, I think. And they found that the link between bras and breast cancer was stronger than the link between smoking and lung cancer. And I was amazed. I just found that very hard to believe. But when I looked at the research that they did and some of the research that's been done overseas, that really seemed to be very valid. And so those kinds of things are, having gone through breast cancer, I wanted to learn both the conventional and the alternative views on how to deal with it. Strangely enough, that view is controversial. When the study came out, the Singers thought that the cancer community would welcome them with open arms. But instead, another study was commissioned in 2014 that was, it claimed that it debunked the Singers' research. But in fact, that second study didn't have a control group. It just pitted women who wore bras who didn't have breast cancer against women who wore bras that did have breast cancer. One group had breast cancer, one group didn't, but both of them wore bras. Whereas, the more serious studies had control groups of people who weren't wearing bras at all. And those found that the incidence of breast cancer there amongst the women was the same as the incidence of breast cancer in men. And I have to say, I don't know any men who've had breast cancer, but I know absolutely tons of women who've had breast cancer. So that's a controversial subject. And some of my doctor friends say, well, I'm confusing causation with correlation and correlation with causation or whatever. But it is definitely something that I think is worth looking at. And after I found out about that, I did stop wearing a bra, and I made sure I went to sleep in loose clothing and all of this kind of thing, because I felt that, and the rationale that they use is that if you're wearing a bra, especially if it's tight, it's preventing the lymph from moving. And so toxins that have collected in the fat tissue, which is where toxins collect, and you have plenty of fat tissue in the breast. So the toxins that collect in there cannot be flushed out if you're not allowing your lymph to move, because it's constricted. You're constricted in a bra. That's the rationale. So that was one of the things that I looked at. I looked at a lot of different research. I tried to eat more healthily. As I said, I tried to exercise more. I tried to live a healthier life. And that's another change. That's another teaching experience from going through breast cancer. A lot of people end up living much healthier lives. Another guy that I spoke to who had cancer, he said, before I got the breast cancer diagnosis, I was 400 pounds. And when I got the breast cancer and I went through chemo, I lost weight. I lost a lot of weight. And I would have died if I'd have stayed at 400 pounds. My health was really not very good, and now it's good. So cancer can be a teacher in all kinds of ways. And you don't necessarily know how it's been teaching you until you've gone through it all. But absolutely, it can be a teacher, and it is a teacher.
Yeah, I agree, because it does. It teaches you in so many different ways. It teaches you in your mind, your body, your soul. And like you said, when I say you detox, it's not just detoxing your mind. It's not just detoxing your body. You're detoxing your home. You're detoxing your surroundings. You're detoxing your environment, your community, your friends, your family. It doesn't mean that you have to throw them on the curb, but you're going to send them with love, because they're no longer, so it really teaches you, because like you said, even before, you spent 30 years, and how wonderful it was to work with your husband. But that was even suppressing who you wanted to be. It did the same with me. I went from, working with, three of the leading banks of Australia to going into a construction with my husband. But even though I was living the life, I was having the fairy tale, the cars, the jewelry, but it wasn't who I was. And life ruffled us. The cancer ruffled. Well, 48 hours before I was diagnosed, we lost our company, and then I got diagnosed. So life went, hey, I'm going to teach you something here. So
Awful. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, we went, great, because we get to do now what we want to do. So my husband's a life coach who on work sites, he used to go and do life coaching anyway, more than his work. And I get to do what I want to do as well, and I think, you know what? So, some people go, oh my goodness, you lost everything. And you're still smiling bigger than ever. Why? Because life could have been so much different. I could have been already 2 years, 3 years underground. So I just think, you know what, life, okay, you want to do that? You want to teach me? Cancer, you want to teach me something? Oh, I know what you're teaching me, how to stand up for me, how to really be me, love myself. Like you said, learn to love yourself. Look in the mirror. I look in the mirror and tell myself, Grace, I effing love you. And I say it like I mean it. Laughter is a therapy. I believe so too. You know what I mean? I love that. I love the fact that you talk about laughter, because I think laugh at you. Like you said, all these things are happening. Your hair's falling out. I had one lady telling me that her eyelashes fell out of one eye and not the other. So she looked like
Wow.
that weird doll in Toy Story, that weird thing, that doll that there was there. I can't remember it. But she said, I look like that because one eye was like closed and one eye had all my eyelashes. But she laughed about it. And I thought, you know what? We're not sitting here saying don't take it seriously. Yes, of course, you got to take it seriously. But laugh. Laugh is the best medicine. I think it really helps you express who you are. It really helps you get through your toughest moments. And it really helps you see things in a different way, because when you're loom and gloom and always depressed and things, and you get that. One lady reached out on a social media saying, I feel depressed. Guess what? Women go through the seven stages of grief. You go through resentment, you go through anger, you go through depression, you go through that. It's like losing someone. You know what I mean? And I mean, in your case, you had like a double whammy, if I can say that, because not only have you lost your husband, but now you've got breast cancer. So you're going through, I mean, if I could say it's a blessing in disguise, because at least you get to do the both at the same time in a way. You know what I mean? If I can say that. But, not that I want you to go through that. But you know what I mean? That you went through that. You went through the anger, the resentment, the depression, the anxiety, all of these things. But it makes you better. But laughter is something that's really amazing. But, we touched on so much. But is there anything else you want to touch on? And thank you for sending about the link between bras and breast cancer. But was there anything else you think our listeners or our viewers is really something that can really help them out?
Well, I would want to direct them to my free PDF, because I think that is going to be very helpful. I did mention it earlier. I write a lot about those kinds of issues in my book, Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, which is available on Amazon as an ebook. And for US people, it's available as a print book through my website. But I have a free PDF on my website, adultererswife.com. It's a terrible name for a website. Nobody can spell it. And there happens to be a porn site that's spelt very similarly. So I don't really, okay, it's adultererswife.com, as in somebody who has a husband that is adulterous, but the wife is not the adulterous one. But anyway, to get to my free PDF, all you need to do is to go to cjauthor.com, which is much easier to remember and to spell, cjauthor.com. And that will be getting you through to the free ebook called Overcoming Infidelity, Tools to Tame the Roller Coaster of Negative Emotions. And boy, do you feel negative emotions when you first get diagnosed with breast cancer, that's for sure. And then also on that same page, you'll be able to have a link to my chocolate mindfulness exercise that I have, because one of the exercises in the PDF is an exercise using chocolate. It was developed for school children to use in British schools. So if kids can do it, I'm sure we adults can do it too. And since I love chocolate, I'm a real chocoholic. It is an important exercise for me. So if you'd like to follow along with me to do the chocolate mindfulness exercise, I have a video of that on that page, cjauthor.com. We'll get you straight through to that. And I think that people just need to know the big deal is there is hope after a breast cancer diagnosis. It is not the end. You are proof of that. I am proof of that. Imagine 6 months from now. Imagine how you're going to be a year from now. You may really feel down in the dumps. You may feel depressed. You may feel like you've got some horrible things that you have to go through. But just imagine how you're going to be a year later, and use the time to think about how you want to live the rest of your life. That's the best thing. It's really wonderful to have an opportunity to become a more complete, creative, and joyful human being. And adversity is a catalyst to do that. And that's what I write about. And that's what I think your function is, Grace, in putting this whole podcast together, because people need to have that encouragement. They need to know that there is life after a breast cancer diagnosis. There is hope. There is not just hope. There is a way to use it to make your life better than it was before. Adversity can be used to make your life better than before. And it's not a quick and easy thing necessarily, but it is certainly doable. And that's the focus of a lot of my writing. I do bring in a lot of humor, though, because if you don't, as you said, if you don't laugh, you cry. So I've got a lot of cartoons and a lot of jokes, but I cover some pretty profound issues too. And that's what's going to happen when I bring out my next book, Hotel Chemo, My Wild Ride Through Breast Cancer and Infidelity. And if you go to my website, adulteraswife.com, you will find I've got the introduction and the table of contents up for that book, so you can read it. And you can access all that through the URL cjauthor.com. As I said, cjauthor.com, so much easier to remember, so much easier to spell than my actual website. So that's really what I would say. That's how you can follow up and find out more about what I'm doing.
Absolutely. And I just brought it up. So all of the links will be in the podcast and also on the YouTube channel. Everything will be up. So all they have to do is click a button and it takes them straight there. I'll make it so much easier for them. But, I really appreciate that, because like you said, it's just, we are the advocates out there to say, hey, because, a lot of, back 40 years ago, back 60 years ago, whatever it is, a lot more women were dying because they didn't have what we have today. But today, I'm really pushing for women, whatever age. When I say that, whatever age, if they want to go and get a pre-test for breasts, on their breast, whether it's chemo, whether it's ultrasound or mammogram or MRI, that they can do it without being charged an arm and a leg. Because what's happening is, yes, women are being diagnosed. And this is, going back, my doctor did say that, because this is where they make the dollar sign.
Oh, yeah.
Because women between 50 and 60-ish or 70 is where mainly the women are that they get diagnosed, sort of 30s and 40s, of course. But what they want to do is they want to give you free mammogram and ultrasound and all that between 40 and 60s, between that. But what happens is there's women who are 30 that are getting diagnosed. But by the time they get diagnosed, it's because they felt it. I asked my doctor that, when it gets to the point where they're feeling it, she's like, yes, Grace, it's stage 3. It's stage 4. It's stage 2 into stage. It's a later stage because by that stage, it's grown. So the thing is too, it's, I really want to push that women are able, eventually, I don't know how, but where it doesn't matter. You want to go and get checked, go and check yourself, because it can happen. And unfortunately, some women, when they get diagnosed, it's because they didn't get it early, and things like that.
Can I just mention one
Yeah,
thing? Because there's a product that I
absolutely.
bought that I was recommended to buy, and I've actually got it here. My Breast Friend. Let me show you what it looks like. My Breast Friend. I've got nothing to do with the company that makes this, but what it is I've always found it incredibly difficult to do breast self-exams. Plus, I have very dense breasts, so it's not very easy to do that. And what this thing is it is the model, the kind of model that doctors work on to be able to do breast exams and feel tumors in women's breasts. And you can hear the rustle of me unwrapping this thing. And this is what it looks like. It's a fake boob with tumors in it that you can practice feeling. I think it costs about $150 or something like that. Whether it and I found that very useful to train on, because when my doctor put my finger on the second tumor that I got in 2014, I could barely feel it. I couldn't feel it at all. So if you are doing your own breast self-exams, and especially now with COVID, with sometimes in some places it's a lot harder to go and see your doctor. It is a good idea to do self-exams. And maybe if you learn how to do them properly, you might be able to find them when they are smaller rather than when they are later stage. I know there are mixed views, because some studies are saying that self-exams really aren't making any difference to survival. Other studies seem to show that it is making a difference to survival. So I don't know what the truth of that is, but I thought it was useful for me to buy this thing as a tool, because I felt like I was completely hopeless at doing breast self-exams. So this is one thing that people might want to consider, and the product is called My Breast Friend. So there are things you can do in terms of self-exams, and as I said, one of the issues is the denser your breasts, the harder it is to actually do those things effectively. But it's definitely worth trying. For example, let me give you the example of my sister. Her tumor was found by somebody else, by a partner. So she didn't find it herself. And I don't believe she was late stage. She was maybe first or second stage. So in effect, that was like a breast self-exam. It just happened to be somebody else who was doing the exam. So there are tumors that are found by women examining their own breasts that are at an early enough stage for them to do very well and survive on whatever treatment that they have to undergo. So I would say that self-exams are probably a good idea. It's the better you can do them, the more effectively you can do them. Obviously, the better off you'll be. But screening is definitely important to do, definitely.
So it's exactly that. And, with COVID and all that, a lot of people aren't going to their appointments. They're using COVID as the excuse and things like that. And I always say, please, if you've got follow-ups, go do them. But I'm not sure if you've heard, just recently, I also heard from my surgeon, as well as other places. I heard it from 3 different people in a matter of not even a month, how if you go and get the vaccine, it can cause the lymph node to swell on that side. So what happens is, my surgeon advises, this is her, it's not mine, this is what she says. She advises to wait, if you can, wait 8 weeks after you have the vaccine. So then the lymph node goes back to normal size, because what's happening is they're doing their, their annual, or they're doing their, follow-ups or whatever it is, and they're finding the lymph nodes are swollen, and then they get all panicky, and then they realize it's because the one of the vaccines, I'm not sure if it's all the vaccines, but one of the vaccines can cause the lymph nodes to swell.
On that
So
side. So say, for example, you've had the vaccine on the left side.
Correct.
It's going to be the lymph nodes on the left side that would be inflamed or whatever, and that will show up
Correct.
in a mammogram or something like that and be suspicious.
Correct. Yes. So, and of course, that's what I say to people. Don't use it as gospel. If you feel something, you go, regardless. I'd rather go to the doctor and she says, "Oh, Grace, did you take the vaccine?" "Yes, I did." "Oh, it's only that, and we've checked it out and it's all sweet," than to go, "Oh, that's because of the vaccine," and it's not. So I always say to people, just like you said, have a bit of a play around and a bit of a squeeze and make sure everything's in the right places and things like that. So I really loved having you on, and I appreciate all that you've shared with us, because I've written down so many notes myself. It's really opened my eyes to a lot of things. On my podcast, and as I said, on my YouTube, we will have all the links to how to purchase your books, the free PDF, everything you need to know about CJ and everything she's been through. I can't wait to get the book and have a read of it. And it's just been amazing. I really have learned so much. I've learned so much today as well. So I really appreciate that. So is there anything else you want to say before we wrap this thing up?
I think we've covered an awful lot of ground. I will just give you my my teacup here, which says, "This is not my star sign." I managed to. Don't worry if you have cancer. You can get through it. It's funny. I love tea, and I always like to have a big mug of it. And I found this in a shop. Nobody obviously wanted to buy it because of the, if you aren't that star sign, the last thing you want is a mug that says cancer on it. And I bought it before I had cancer. And then when I had cancer, I thought, "Oh, do I really want to be using this mug anymore?" And then I thought, screw it, I'm going to continue using this mug. So that is my tea mug. So basically, you can beat cancer. That's what I'm saying. You can just, it can be done. There is hope, and you can use it to make your life better than it was before. And do get my free PDF on cjauthor.com. And you'll find out exactly how to get off that horrible emotional roller coaster that a cancer diagnosis puts you in. It's inevitable, but you can get through it. That's what I would say. You can absolutely get through it.
Absolutely. Now, I am a Cancerian, believe it or not, so I really loved your mug. So I could use it for two things. So if anyone says, "Oh, cancer," yeah, well, I'm a Cancerian. So there you go. I could use it depending on what day I'm in, what mood I'm in. But definitely, I thank you again. And I can't wait to read your book and then have you on my podcast again. And having said that, I wish you so much well and goodness and so much light. And I can't wait to, get in contact with you again soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be on your podcast. You really are a poster child for the breast cancer hero's journey yourself. So thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you. And to everyone listening in, I hope you guys have enjoyed today's podcast. Can't wait to have you guys listening on the next one. And like always, I wish you so much love and light.